Hey everyone, Father Lane here. Welcome to our final class in our course on the prophetic literature here on the banks of the Ohio River in Cincinnati, home to Major League Baseball's oldest team. The Cincinnati Red Stockings were founded in 1869, and we conclude this course by discussing the Book of Daniel, a book that gives us the expression Ancient of Days, that harkens back to the dawn of creation to describe for a suffering people how God is still active. We're going to look at this very unique book today, and in our agenda you can see there's a number of different wrinkles for us to look at. We're going to first look at the apocalyptic literature, this genre that we see only in the book of Daniel in the Old Testament. Then we're going to talk a little about the diachronic history. How did this book come to be? Then we'll deal a little bit with a synchronic survey before moving on to its theology. So we begin first with this apocalyptic genre. The word apocalyptic conjures up a lot of images in the American imagination, but the word apocalyptic comes from the Greek apokalyptein, a verb meaning to unveil, which is equivalent to the Latin word revelare. This is why the New Testament book of Revelation is sometimes called the Apocalypse. Same word, Latin and Greek. Apocalyptic literature as a genre contains a number of distinctive features, and I refer you to the words of John Collins, who's the world's foremost expert on this subject. Here's a passage from one of his books that merits a lengthy quotation. He writes, "The Jewish apocalypses were not produced by a single apocalyptic movement, but constituted a genre that could be utilized by different groups in various situations. This genre was characterized by a conventional manner of revelation, through heavenly journeys or visions, mediated by an angel to a pseudonymous seer. It also involved a conceptual framework which assumed that this life was bounded by the heavenly world of the angels and by the prospect of eschatological judgment. This conceptual framework is a symbolic structure that can be given expression through different theological traditions and with varying emphases on the pattern of history or the cosmology of the heavenly regions. The apocalyptic revelation provides a comprehensive view of the world, which then provides the basis for exhortation or consolation. The constant factor is that the problem is put in perspective by the otherworldly revelation of a transcendent world and eschatological judgment." You'll notice on your screen I've highlighted in different colors different features that constitute an apocalypse, and different scholars use different words, but this is a good way for us to analyze this book of Daniel. The same characteristics appear often in the book of Revelation in the New Testament, as well as a plethora of non-canonical apocalyptic texts. Indeed, this apocalyptic genre was common within Judaism from around 200 BC into the 2nd century AD, so this overlaps Jesus' time. Let's turn our attention now to Daniel chapter 9, an example text that will show us the apocalyptic features present in this book of Daniel. "Gabriel, whom I had seen in vision before, came to me in flight at the time of the evening offering. He instructed me in these words, 'Daniel, I have now come to give you understanding. When you began your petition, an answer was given, which I have come to announce, because you are beloved. Therefore mark the answer and understand the vision.'" So notice what's going on in this text. Gabriel, the angel, he appears as a man to Daniel after Daniel's been praying for the people of Jerusalem. Gabriel is the mediator of a message from God. God gives him this secret answer, this secret knowledge, and indeed a vision, you can see in the green, a vision which shows him the world in a way that is not perceptible to the others in the world. For Daniel, and this is crucial in apocalypses, apocalypses are a genre written to an oppressed people to make the point that although you may be suffering today, God will be victorious in the end. An apocalypse takes a suffering audience that's struggling in this world and broadens their perspective to see the world in a context that is much more cosmic, that goes far beyond the experience of the here and the now. And so a recurrent theme in Daniel is going to be, you see what the Assyrian Empire did and what the Babylonian Empire did and what the Persian Empire did, all these different empires have done. They had their day, but it expired. God is victorious in the end. This gets us to the diachronic features of this book. But before we go into the history, we need to point out a few other unique features about Daniel. It is a book of 3 languages. It's one of a kind in the Old Testament. You'll remember that it occurs in the prophets in the Christian canon. In the Greek tradition, it's the 4th major prophet. But in the Hebrew tradition, it's included as one of the writings, and indeed seems to be much, much later. The book appears in 3 languages. Hebrew and Aramaic constitute the proto-canonical section of Daniel, and then there are Greek passages which are deuterocanonical, so they don't appear in the Protestant or Jewish Bibles. For various reasons, scholars believe this book was written in the 2nd century and set in the 6th century BC to tell this people living under Antiochus IV Epiphanes, suffering under his tyranny, telling them to remain faithful. Let's look at why scholars draw that conclusion. First, we should note that the character of Daniel is known from outside the book of Daniel. As you look here at Ezekiel chapter 13, Daniel is juxtaposed to Noah and Job, 3 characters from the tradition of Israel known for their righteousness. And so Daniel is a character known more broadly in the Hebrew tradition. Let's look at Daniel chapter 11 here. There shall arise in his place a despicable person, to whom the royal insignia shall not be given. He shall enter by stealth and seize the kingdom by fraud. Armed forces shall be completely overwhelmed by him and crushed, even the prince of the covenant. Who is this despicable person? The context indicates that it is indeed Antiochus IV Epiphanes who brings about the situation that causes the Maccabean revolt. Then let's read on a little later here in Daniel chapter 11. By his deceit he shall make some who were disloyal forsake the covenant, but those who remain loyal to their God shall take strong action. Those with insight among the people shall instruct the many, though for a time the sword, flames, exile, and plunder will cause them to stumble. So here's a question. If Daniel is a prophet, couldn't he predict in the 6th century that all of this would happen in the 2nd century? Isn't God powerful enough to reveal that? Yes, of course, but the evidence suggests that that's not what's going on here. One, the apocalyptic character is best situated in this period where we have a lot of extant literature that shows a lot of the same features of the genre, but also you have to account for to whom is this written. This message makes no sense in the 6th century. Like we talked about with Isaiah's authorship, Daniel has a similar situation. A theory that would have this message written in the 6th century collapses under its own weight because it can't account for why it was handed on the way that it was. Moreover, the fact that it's augmented in Greek suggests a later date. So here we have a book written in the 2nd century during the Maccabean revolt, set in the 6th century to respond to the present situation under Antiochus IV Epiphanes. This readies us for our synchronic survey. Daniel has 2 main halves, chapters 1 through 6, which deal with stories, the saga of Daniel. All this is set during the exilic period, although there are some historical inaccuracies or some infelicities. So again, we think we have a text here that is written much later, hearkening back to this exilic period, including the famous Daniel in the lion's den in chapter 6. And then chapters 7 through 12 consist of visions. Now remember, there's also a deuterocanonical part of Daniel, which consists of part of chapter 3 and then all of chapters 13 and 14. So chapters 13 and 14 are kind of their own thing. Chapters 7 through 12 are where we find the most overtly apocalyptic qualities of the book of Daniel. It is possible, we should point out, that some of the stories may well have an exilic antecedent that have been handed on up to the final form. So it's possible the book was in fact written over a lengthy period of time or has a more complex prehistory. Anyhow, let's move on to the theology. And the most important theological point in Daniel is life after death, the resurrection. We read from Daniel chapter 12. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, others to reproach and everlasting disgrace. But those with insight shall shine brightly like the splendor of the firmament, and those who lead the many to justice shall be like the stars forever. Behold the sole text in the Hebrew Bible that explicitly affirms life after death, a major theme for the New Testament. Well, we have covered a lot of territory on this trip through the prophets, and we are now well set to move on into the New Testament. I look forward to another course, but for now, read well and pray well.